Welcome to the KrakCast. We've got a very special guest this week, but before I introduce him, I just want to set up this episode. We are fascinated by fast food here on the show. John, did you say that's fair?
Not just on the show, just generally, yeah.
And we've been trying to come up with a way to do the Krakow pizza scene for a long time now, because we consider it an almost mythically important topic. And we will get to, in part 2 of this wonderful series, ranking the best places in Krakow, talking about the change in the scene since we first arrived here 15 years ago, and that's going to be a wonderful special. But this week, we wanted to talk about the pizza business itself. What is its eternal appeal? Why do we all love pizza so much? It's by a mile the most popular fast food on earth. And we were kind
Who doesn't love pizza?
Everyone loves pizza.
Serious question. Who doesn't?
It's kind of like not liking dogs. You know, it's you know, it's rare.
I hate rainbows.
People publicly express this opinion that they don't like pizza in any form. Very rare. So what we were thinking is, we know somebody who's a bit of a subject matter expert, if you don't mind me. And we'd love to welcome the wonderful Noel O'Donnell to the show. How are you, Noel?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
What I want to start with, Noel, is take us back through the sands of time. It's 1971. You've got your bell-bottom trousers on. You're in London. You know, you got the Cream album underneath your elbow, and you're walking down a high street and you smell cheese. What happens next?
It wasn't quite like that at all. I was actually working as an engineer on the London Underground, and Pizza Hut had opened. I had no idea what pizza was at that point. And my girlfriend, Pizza Hut had just opened in London. They sent a guy over from the States to open it, and my girlfriend got a job there as a waitress. My girlfriend at the time. So I used to go and pick her up in the evenings, and got to know the guy, and that's when I started eating pizza for the very first time. I had no idea what it was.
Describe the very first Pizza Hut that you walked into. What are we talking about here? Was it the same as today? The same kind of plasticky feel, or was it a little bit more, cozy and?
No, it was very different from what it is now. It was in those days. It was quite a cool, trendy place where with soft lighting, candles on the table, nice background music, and it was a place where a young guy would take his girlfriend for a romantic meal in the evening.
I think it's very interesting, though, that you say that this is a new thing in London, right?
Yeah.
So London, of all places. It wasn't some small village in the middle of nowhere. It was London. Yeah. Pizza's a new thing. You know, today we take it for granted that the pizza business has been around forever. It's like a staple. Like if there was some new undiscovered island that we somehow civilized, there would be a pizza restaurant within 72 hours on this new undeveloped piece of property. But there was a time when it was very much a novelty, right?
Yeah.
Before that, before pizza places were established as chains, as in, every neighborhood had one, what was the kind of dominant fast foodish kind of presence in streets and neighborhoods?
Well, fast food as such didn't. I guess the only one that existed at that time would have been Wimpy hamburgers. And there was a small chain called Pizza Land and another chain called Pizza Express. So they were quite small. Pizza Express was considered to be more authentic.
So you get in on the ground floor, right?
Yeah.
And what's your first job in Pizza Hut, by the way? You go straight in as restaurant manager, or are you working?
No, he had a problem convincing me to get involved. He said, first of all, he told me he couldn't get anybody interested in becoming a trainee manager there, because at that time the British wouldn't do that kind of work.
It was seen as a bit American, was it?
It was very American. And so he talked me into doing a bit of part-time work there in the evenings, which I did. And he convinced me to become trainee manager.
And how many Pizza Huts were there in London at that stage? Just one. Okay, so you're in. It's pizza ground zero basically. You've got these.
Pizza Hut.
You've got one chain, Pizza Land, that's maybe along this model, but they blew it. And in '65, you had Pizza Express. But you were the first guy to expand, and you learned the American style of management. Yep. And what happens next, Al? I mean, describe how a chain and a franchise worked back then, and how it was so novel, and
Well, the first thing was they didn't want a franchise in the UK. They wanted to keep that for themselves. And it moved very slowly in the early days. It was very new to the Brits. They saw it obviously in the movies and on TV. All the American cop shows always had a cop standing over a dead body eating a slice of pizza.
What show was this?
Kojak, if you want to know. So it was a very, very cool, trendy sort of place to take your girlfriend. And it moved very, very slowly for a few years. What really made it take off was they introduced all-you-can-eat buffet.
I remember this offering. That was still around in the 90s.
Appeal to the gluttony. That always works, huh?
Yeah, and that was very new to London. And they introduced a salad bar, which was also very new in London. And that quickly got the name out there. So they progressed slowly. I think we reached a point where we had 8 or 9 restaurants. And then Pepsi-Cola got involved. And the restaurants became highly profitable, very profitable. And they wanted to expand more rapidly, but had a problem because the landlords hadn't heard of Pizza Hut and didn't really want a restaurant. They preferred to let their premises to a bank or a
restaurant's
shop.
Too smelly.
Yes, they didn't
dirty generally. I guess.
Yeah. So then Pizza Hut got involved with the pub business was starting to go into decline at that point. So there was a few of the breweries with a huge number of pubs to get rid of. So Pizza Hut managed to do a deal with Whitbread, and they had pubs all over the UK, and they were ideal to convert into Pizza Hut restaurants.
You touched on something there that I'm fascinated. It seems to me that pizza, it's just one of those business models in food that has less waste and more profit. And I want to talk a bit about that. I mean, especially, let's wind it back to 71. How difficult was it just to get the raw produce needed for what we would call a decent pizza these days? And what kind of dodgy substitutions were you using? Because there must have been a few now.
It was, yeah. It was very, very difficult.
Spam and shit.
No, I mean, I can remember having to phone the States to order Italian plum tomatoes, and they would send it over in a container. Also, mozzarella cheese was difficult to come by in the UK.
I'm not going to like the end of this sentence. I know I'm not.
They used Edam originally. It worked okay.
So can I say, sorry to interrupt, no, but going back, having these sourcing problems, a visitor from America, for example, seeing Pizza Hut in London, stepping inside, may or may not recognize the pizza he was served, right, as a Pizza Hut pizza?
It was pretty close to what they had in the States, yeah.
Not always exactly what you wanted.
The big difference was Edam cheese, which it worked okay in a pizza.
It does work okay, does it? Yeah. I mean, it'll give the same consistency.
It melts properly in it, yeah. And it doesn't have a very strong flavour, which you don't need on a pizza.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, it worked.
Fascinating. What was the most popular topping back then? In 71, was it all about pepperoni?
Well, we couldn't find pepperoni.
What?
That didn't exist in London. Yeah. I remember picking up the phone to various suppliers, and the first thing they would say is, "Pizza who?" I said, "Pizza Hut," and trying to get hold of pepperoni and stuff like that, and it just wasn't available.
Again, today we can't imagine a world without pepperoni pizza.
Yep.
I mean, not too long ago it was new. Yep. So what was your like the entry level pizza, so to speak? Whereas today it would be the cheese and pepperoni.
The most popular one was which I think is quite boring, was ham and mushroom. That's what the drunken guys want after the pubs.
My wife likes.
And then we I'm ashamed to say, we introduced pineapple, which
no. All right, cook, get him out of here.
Thanks for coming, Noel. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time on the KrakCast. Thanks, bye.
That started in Australia, in Pizza Hut in Australia.
Let's blame them. Let's blame the Australians. So the ingredient that shall not be named on pizzas. No, I'm curious. You said it took some time to get some traction, but yes. The whole time on a graph, things are moving up slowly.
Yep.
I guess at some point there was a tipping point where kind of the momentum builds up and it kind of pushes itself forward. I'm curious. Dave mentioned something about this. Is there something about the pizza business and the pizza franchising business that kind of promotes its growth, or do you think it was just people discovering and falling in love with pizza, or somewhere in the middle?
I think basically it was people discovering pizza. They'd seen it on TV, as I say, in the films, and after a few years, and of course it is highly profitable, very profitable.
You mentioned profitable. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and Dave knows something about this too. In a restaurant, the retail price you see on the menu, let's say it's roughly 3 times the cost. That's as a rule of thumb.
Right.
Is the pizza different? Pizza business any different? Are the margins higher in pizza?
Margins in pizza are very high. They used to work to a cost of 20 to 21%.
Yeah,
which gave you a huge
5 to 1. Yeah, jeez.
Yeah. One of the executives from the States one time described the kind of profit we were making in the UK as obscene.
Because people would pay more.
In a good way.
I'm guessing people would pay more, and then they're converting, the strong British pound back into dollars.
The other element was that, and this is something another American executive said. He said, if you can produce something that the housewife can't easily replicate at home, which has a bit of mystique about it, you can charge a hell of a lot of money for it.
Special occasion kind of thing, and feed the family. At this time, we're going back to the 70s. Is everything strictly in-house, or was there delivery at this point?
Oh, it's strictly in-house.
So when did delivery come along, and how did that revolutionize the whole business?
Very late arriving. Didn't arrive till about, in fact, it's another story, but I ended up running a restaurant, which I partly owned, which introduced delivery to the UK. And that was 1985.
And this is a new thing.
Hold on a second. You invented delivery in the UK?
No, I didn't.
No, you legend.
I do not claim to have done.
You just Yeah, I know, but I'm exaggerating on your behalf. What? Okay, and you just reminded me of something, a story you told me once down the pub that absolutely blew my mind. No, tell our listeners about the time you added cheese to garlic bread. And who else had done that at this point? Nobody in London.
It's just a sort of a snack I used to make for myself. I just put some cheese on garlic bread, put it in the oven, bake it for a little while, and you get a nice snack. So I convinced them to put it on the menu. We already had garlic bread, which came with pasta, so they put it on as a starter.
Have you ever seen the episode of Phoenix Nights where Peter Kay tasted? It's the future, Tony. And I've tasted it.
I'm surprised they didn't take it a step further. You could put pepperoni on the top of it with some cheese and some other ingredients.
Is it possible, Noel? Is it possible to work in a pizza kitchen and really take care of your waistline?
No, it's not.
There's too many temptations.
I was a very different shape back then. That's why I'm pre-diabetic now.
I cannot picture the lovely Slim O'Donnell frame being out of shape at all.
I was about 3 stone heavier then than I am now. Yes.
Surrounded by garlic bread with cheese and all these pizzas, and what are you supposed to do, right? I mean, come on.
So, I think that's a hell of a claim. Like, you were the first restaurant in London to have garlic bread with cheese on the menu, and that's because of your luncheon habits.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Boom. That's an achievement.
Let me take it back to delivery for a second, because again, this is a standard part of the industry now, but obviously there was a time when it was very much a novelty. Revolutionized the business. Obviously, these days in the age of Uber Eats and everything, any restaurant can have delivery basically. But for the longest time, it was associated with pizza and only pizza. This must have made it even more obscenely profitable than it was before. I mean, suddenly you can sell not only to all the tables in your restaurant, you can start sending them out the door. Maybe the margin isn't as great. There's some other cost involved, but this must have made it even more profitable.
There's a lot more cost involved.
There was quite a bit more cost involved because in the early days, and this is after I'd moved on from Pizza Hut.
What kind of food was the restaurant serving that you were at?
Pizza.
It was pizza again.
Yeah. So
that's important because then you're in the boxes, which is at least better than having like plastic containers.
Well, we used to deliver using a van, which was very costly to do before motorcycles came along. So it was quite costly, but it changed the pizza market completely, and I think it started the downfall of Pizza Hut, who were very slow to get involved, and Domino's came and stole the action.
Even today, Pizza Hut not really associated with delivery.
No, they never wanted to.
Associated with the restaurant experience, right?
Yeah, they never wanted
to their detriment, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that sounds like, you could have been something massive, like you started a chain of pizza delivery. What happened?
We bought a franchise from another pizza company, and they were about to get into the delivery business. Mm-hmm. So we were the first one to actually start it. And at one point, we were running the busiest pizza outlet delivery in the whole of the UK.
Wow. Give us an idea of the daily volume we're talking about here.
Well, we had 4 vans on the road. I can't remember exactly what kind of sales we had. Or
maybe pizzas out the door.
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Hundreds.
Sorry. Hundreds, yeah. Many hundreds. Yeah.
Many hundreds. That's why you get so fat in the kitchen. I would be enormous if I was in the kitchen.
The great thing about it is the amount of food you're sending out. I can't imagine there's much food waste. You're turning over product that quickly. It's all the same 4 or 5 ingredients. You're buying huge bags of cheese, huge bags of toppings, not pepperoni, obviously.
The main ingredient, which is dough, you just take a handful and make a piece with. So there's hardly any wastage.
Yeah.
So, the other interesting thing, which I forgot to mention, was in the early days of Pizza Hut in the UK, takeaway was in bags, not boxes.
What kind of bag?
What?
It was in a bag, believe it or not.
Well, you sliced it and stacked it?
You put it on a little square board, you slid it into a bag, and you tented the bag and stapled it. That's how that was taken.
And you carried it vertically?
Yes. No. You picked it up by its peak.
So the pizza's cut into pieces.
Yeah. Put on a little.
So it's instead of
What kind of 70s witchcraft
instead
is
of flat
this?
and wide, it's just tall and thin. Kind of.
Yeah.
We'll have to get an illustration of that.
That's how it was done in the States. It was a long time ago.
Let me ask about, and we're going to kind of transition into a different subject. I know we're going to jump around a little bit, but that's okay. You mentioned the number of restaurants and the volume you're doing. You get into volume sourcing. You get into scale, right? You have a chain, X number of restaurants. You start buying huge quantities of stuff.
Yep.
And so then you get into questions of quality assurance and consistency and things like that. And I want to use that point to transition into something else I want to ask about. You're familiar with the chain side of things, the scale side of things. And a lot of people will insist, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, that the best pizza is in your little one-off neighborhood restaurants, not a chain. Chain is for tasteless cardboard, and the real good pizza is in this little family-owned hole in the wall. What's your take on that? And can you have high-quality, great pizza at scale?
Yes, I believe so. I think the biggest thing that Pizza Hut did was to introduce the conveyor oven, which didn't require much skill to run. Mm-hmm. So it took that element out of it. So you could be more consistent throughout the chain.
And the conveyor oven is it's running through, and it comes out the other end, and it's cooked when it comes out.
Running through the middle, yeah.
So you standardize the process so any 18-year-old kid can understand how to make a pizza. Yeah. You don't have to be an expert.
Because that's one of the great talents a pizza chef needs to have is timing. Like if you leave a pizza in for 10 seconds too long and the cheese goes black on top, that's not good.
But you can't have that kind of risk when you're running a chain. I mean, it has to be standardized, right? It has to.
Yes.
You have
my
to
big question.
McDonald's-ize everything.
I forgot something
for lack of a better term.
I forgot to ask something about the start of the 70s. I'm kicking myself now. Did you serve chips? And how did people react to not being able to have chips?
Never chips.
Was it a question you had to deal with on a daily basis?
Well, there was
no bleeding chips. That's what you'd be told in Dublin.
There was one occasion where I was on the door. It was on the Tuesday night, which was our all-you-can-eat buffet night, and this old lady came up and she said, "Are you sure that I can go in there and eat whatever I like for 99 pence, I think it was?" And I said, "Yes, sure. If you don't like it, come back. I'll give you your money back." So she came back a few minutes later and she said, "I knew there was a catch." She said, "You just serve pizza in here."
Busted, Noel. She saw through your scam.
I mean, I think, I contributed to Pizza Hut's pull out in Ireland because that all-you-eat buffet, man, we used to torture that. Our tactic was never eat the crust, right? You just bring a load of slices back down and just eat the cheesy part.
Well, the staff hated it because we used to call it pig night, but for every guy that came in and ate 2 large pizzas, he had his nice-looking girlfriend with him who ate 1 slice. So it was actually quite profitable.
Yeah, you're still making money. I mean, some people you're gonna lose on some people, for sure.
The football team used to go down to the Sheraton for the all-you-can-eat buffet, and we'd have like 16 prawns and 12 cuts of tuna.
They lose money on
along with drinking 12 bottles of wine.
I remember here in Krakow, there used to be a Pizza Hut on Grodzka Street, right opposite Peter and Paul Church, for the longest time, and they introduced a salad bar, and it was an all-you-can-eat salad bar. Mm-hmm. With the qualification, which I guess really doesn't make it all you can eat, but you can only make 1 trip.
Yep.
And so people would stack it like
I remember this.
Probably high to get their money's worth. This is what people are going to do when you have all you can eat, right? So you have to expect that.
I've never understood that. I thought the whole idea of the salad bar was to get you to eat as much of it as possible, so you don't eat some of the higher cost pizza. It's just veg.
Well, in the end, we just gave up at pizza and said, "Look, let them eat as much as they want on the side," because we had so many problems with little old lady going back for 1 more tomato where the waitress would attack her.
No bad for you.
Had some Polish stuff.
Again, we're jumping all over the place, and that's fine. One thing I've noticed in a lot of Polish restaurants, Polish chains like Benoli's, for example, and others.
Don't say that word.
No, wait a second. One thing I've noticed, in my opinion, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, they have way too many pizzas. There's like 35 pizzas on the menu, right? Yeah. And it's not, this abundance of choice is not a virtue, in my opinion. Let's make it a smaller menu. What was the menu like in those days? And what do you think about a focused menu versus a very long menu?
Exactly. I really searched for an old Pizza Hut menu I had at home, and I wanted to bring it with me today. And there were perhaps 10 pizzas on there. Just a thin crust, 10 pizzas. wine and
Which
beer.
is enough.
And that was it.
That's enough. 10 pizzas. Come on.
Yeah, because I've never understood that, right? Why not just always make it, tell us what you want on the pizza and save all the 40 options, the 40 fixed options. And I'd say
way too many pizzas on menus.
Surely every second person tries to customise it anyway, because it's just such an inherently easy thing to do. Even in a good pizzeria, you'll tend to customise an order.
One interesting thing about pizza, which I forgot to mention, the guys that founded it were two college kids, basically, Carneys, Frank and Dan Carney, who were of Irish descent. And their father passed away, and they were trying to make a few bob. And they bought this hut and had no idea what they were going to serve in there. I mean,
what city are we in?
This was probably in the early 60s.
This is in Kansas.
Wichita.
Wichita.
And so
Wichita line.
Conversation with him, and he said we had no idea what we were going to sell. It was going to be a snack bar.
Sorry, you had a conversation with him?
With Dan Carney, yeah.
So, like Mr. Pizza Hut?
I met both of them, yeah.
No way!
Nice.
You met like Ronald McDonald of Pizza Hut. That is unbelievable.
In fact, I was awarded a trophy by one of them, which is another story. But
Still got the trophy?
Yes, I do. But Dan Carney told me that they had no idea what they were going to sell in this little hut. So they had a friend who just left the army, who was of Italian descent, and he said, "I know how to make pizza." So
they were going to call it the miscellaneous food hut until he came along.
It's going to be a snack bar, and so this guy said, "Yeah, I can do it." So it became Pizza Hut. That's where the name came from.
I swear to God, I loved Pizza Hut when I was younger. Like, I thought it was by far the best of the options on the high street. Apart from, there was one place in Dublin now, I don't know if you've ever been in there, it was on Stephen's Green for a few years, called the Chicago Pizza Pie Factory.
Oh, yes.
It was absolutely wonderful. They used to do the Chicago style deep dish pizzas, had the big high ceilings and the arcades, and it's my favourite restaurant when I was a kid.
That probably originated, there was an American guy that opened one in London. It may be the same.
It is the same, yeah.
It was on Hanover Square, in a basement on Hanover Square in London. And yeah, very good pizza.
John, what was your favourite pizzeria growing up?
I'm not sure if I had one. We had a regional chain called Little Caesars. Actually, it's a national chain. Little Caesars. They made their name on being cheap. It was always 2 for 1.
Pizza.
Yeah, pizza. You couldn't buy one pizza. It was always 2, and that alone. And no, from your experience, I'm sure just being all you can eat night, pig night, right? This gets attention.
Oh yes,
and you trade some margin for some volume and whatever.
Whenever we were opening a new store in the UK in London, we'd put out in the local newspaper a 2 for 1 deal, and they would be queuing around the block. The big thing that really made it happen was TV. The minute they went on TV, sales went through the roof.
Now you mentioned TV and Pizza Hut with their money, PepsiCo, they have the cash to do this. They can scale up. They can have major marketing muscle. Whereas again, your neighborhood mom and pop operation cannot. Does this kind of reinforce this impression that the chains are, corporate, army surplus pizza, basically without taste, and your local stuff is, I'm trying to get to the point where is it in our heads that chain pizza is inferior to local pizza, or is there something to that?
I don't think it's inferior. I mean, you could ask the same about McDonald's. Is it a better hamburger than the one-off hamburger chain?
But that's the thing with McDonald's. Let's say McDonald's, it's probably the best example. Let's say right next door there's a gourmet burger. Every place now has a gourmet burger place. Clearly, objectively superior burgers, but we all know that McDonald's is going to have 10 times the income every single day because it's McDonald's.
But what you're getting with McDonald's and pizza is
consistent, quick, cheap.
Yeah.
You know exactly what you're getting before you walk into the door.
Travel throughout Poland or the UK, wherever.
We're creatures of habit. We never throw this accusation at the humble cheese sandwich. I've been eating a cheese and ham sandwich for my lunch basically every day of my life, and you never kind of go, the guy's addicted to cheese and ham sandwiches. We need to close down the cheese and ham sandwich industry. They're ruining people's lives. People are just creatures of habit. And I think once in a while, I'll have a Pizza Hut. There's one near my house, and Charlie loves the crust in Pizza Hut, so we go there quite often. But I do believe there are some places which we'll get to in our next special that are phenomenal in Krakow, John. And
speaking of that, no, based on your experience and your time spent in the pizza kitchen these days, all these years later, here in Krakow, do you find yourself being especially maybe critical of the pizza scene, or are you seeing things that we don't see, or give us an idea of what you experience when you go.
Forget that for a second. Let's go back to '89 when you first got here. What were the pizzas like then?
Yeah, how do you treat your pizza experience these days, and what do you think about the Krakow pizza scene?
I think the standard here is very, very high. There's a few places I've been to that serve excellent pizzas. Dolio on Krakowska is one of my favourite.
Yeah, it's really
Pizza Garden, which I think now is
Pizza Garden's great, yeah.
And I had one recently in a restaurant called Mr. Lobster. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Mr. Lobster?
Mr. Lobster.
Don't know
and
that
he's,
one.
Obvious name for a pizza.
He's a genuine Italian. That was his nickname, Mr. Lobster.
Okay.
So that's why he called the restaurant Mr.
Why
Lobster.
not? Maybe he has a pig night too.
And that's no, he does. It's a very small restaurant.
Can we just grab a bit of little biographical details here, Noel? So you met your Polish wife in London, and what happens? I mean, had you ever visited Poland during communist times? Did you eventually visit soon after the wall fell? What happened there? I mean, what was your first experience of Polish pizza?
Because your roots go back here quite a long way, I think, right?
Yeah.
Your experience,
well,
rather.
coming here as a visitor, basically.
Yeah.
But I met her in 1976 at a New Year's Eve party in London, and after a few years, she convinced me. She dragged me kicking and screaming to a wedding in Poland, which I didn't want to come to because I thought it was going to be a dreary, grey, communist country, and which was just outside Warsaw. So then she said, well, look, why not go and visit my parents down in Krakow? So I got off the train in Krakow and walked across to Rennik and went, wow.
And what year was this?
Technicolor. I think it was about 88 or 89, I'm not quite sure, just before they got independence. Mm-hmm. And then I found myself visiting Krakow on a regular basis, maybe 3 times a year, until I retired and moved here permanently nearly 11 years ago.
Which is when we met you. Yeah. Legend.
Is it possible to mess up a pizza?
You must have seen some terrible pizza. When you first got here, it must have been like being back in 1962
I'm not talking
in
like
London.
frozen Tesco pizza. I'm like, proper restaurant. Can you really mess up a pizza?
Just really using cheap ingredients and being very skimpy with the topping. Yeah, I find that happens quite often. But I think the standard in Krakow is very high.
You mentioned Pizza Garden. How do you rate the chains here? Dave doesn't like the name Benoli. I have to say, I give Benoli from time to time only because they're across the street from where I live. For me, it's a matter of proximity.
Terrible.
Whatever's close. But sometimes good, sometimes
they need to get one of them conveyor ovens because people do not know how to take a pizza out of the oven at the right time. Terrible. Getting worse all the time. Getting worse all the time.
Domino's,
dreadful.
Pizza. Who are your other big chains?
Telepizza.
Telepizza, of course,
De
Grasso. Anybody stand out in terms of chains?
I tend not to use the chains. I have used Pizza Hut and I found they were okay. Mm-hmm. But I generally use the one-off, own pizza.
I got one gripe with Polish local Pizza Hut. They're skimpy with the cheese. And with Pizza Hut's flavour, actually, the cheese makes a massive difference because when there's enough of it on it, the pizza's lovely. It's really tasty and
the cheese
chewy.
is probably the most expensive part.
I know, but sometimes I order double cheese and it's less than single cheese, and you're kind of going, "You've cheese screwed me here." This is
cheese cheated.
No. Do you think in the Polish market, maybe the local Krakow market, do you think there's room for a player to move in and really establish themselves as the real proper pizza place, or is the market kind of saturated?
I think it's saturated. I think it would be very difficult for anybody to move in now, a chain in particular, and compete with them. It really is saturated.
In fact, I see it going the other way, and the bigger ones, some of them going out of business, your Telepizzas and your Benoli's, because there's so many good craft pizzerias that Pishney and Uber deliver that most people these days don't really think about getting one of the chain pizzas unless you want it in a half an hour. Pizza Hut's right beside where I live, so I know they'll deliver it in 25 minutes. And I know Charlie likes it, so sometimes
you're right. It seems like Uber Eats kind of levels the field a little bit. It gives you a lot more options. They're not just your neighborhood place. Why not try something from across town you otherwise wouldn't try because Uber Eats will bring it to your door? That's interesting, yeah.
Didn't see that coming when you invented delivery and all them smartphone apps.
No, I didn't. Certainly didn't.
I have one more question of you. This is something I noticed when I moved to Poland. What are your thoughts on putting ketchup on pizza?
Oh, God.
Good one. That's obscene.
Good man.
Get it off your chest now.
Excellent question, Dr. Mike.
Do that?
Excellent question. It's a Polish thing, I guess, yeah?
Although I have to say, the first time I saw someone putting mayonnaise in the pizza, I thought, interesting.
So we blame the Australians for pineapple. The Poles and their ketchup are just a different story. Surely somebody else must have some weird pizza habits.
There's one more that I forgot to mention, chili, which I don't think belongs on a pizza.
I don't like spicy pizzas.
Spicy chilies.
Spicy chilies. But we had a few restaurants in London in areas where a lot of the Asians lived, and they would bring in their own chilies. and ask us to put them on the pizza. So that's how it found its way onto the menu.
I wonder, with all the Polish people in England and London in particular, if waitresses have been confused by requests for ketchup to be brought to. I'm sure it's happened more than once.
Flavored ketchup.
But there's tomato sauce on it.
Why do you want ketchup? What's wrong with you?
I know one time I took a pizza back home. We had a visitor from Krakow, my wife's cousin, and I couldn't believe it when she got a bottle of tomato ketchup and put it on top of it like this.
And I just want to go back to this in Krakow when you first got here. Were there any pizzerias at all?
I didn't notice any.
Didn't notice any. You would have spotted them too, whichever.
Well, I can tell you, I know for a fact that Pizza Hut was here in '94.
Yeah,
probably in Warsaw City Centre.
Warsaw.
No, they were in Krakow. They did arrive.
Yeah, in Warsaw they had Pizza Hut, KFC, Taco Bell combined. Actually, but here in Krakow they had Pizza Hut on Grodzka and
Did they go bust in Ireland?
maybe one other place.
I don't know.
pretty sure they
That
went
was
by in
after
Ireland.
my time.
Yeah.
Speaking of Ireland, Noel, you and Dave are Irish. I know you spent your pizza time mostly in England. We're making fun of the Australians, making fun of the Poles. Don't you guys, the Irish, don't you have any pizza peculiarities at all?
Well, pizza hadn't arrived in Ireland when I left, so
It was barely getting going when I was going.
It's a recent invention. You guys don't have your, I don't know what you put on pizza in Ireland.
Potatoes.
Do you know what, right? Honestly, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of dedicated pizza places because our chip shops are Italian owned, so a lot of them did a half decent pizza.
Yes.
But when I was growing up, a guy started working in our Borza in Churchtown that made his own pizza, and he was a real Italian guy. And we were like, we have never fucking tasted this before. This is unbelievable, like, you know. And then the Domino's did finally open in Tala, and quite famously in Ireland, it's the most profitable Domino's in the world.
I don't know much about Domino's, actually. I don't think I've ever had Domino's pizza.
Domino's in Ireland, they use good ingredients, good local source ingredients. The pizza's nicer than it is. I've had the Domino's here. It's not up to scratch.
Dominates in Ireland when it comes to delivery, right?
Yeah, and it's expensive as shit as well. Like, it's like people will order a medium pizza, some chicken doohickeys, as my mates call them, some wedges, and it might be 18, 20 quid. Like, you know?
it also dominates in the UK right now.
Yeah, completely.
Again, marketing muscle,
They
deep pockets.
really hit Pizza Hut very hard. Very hard.
Pizza Hut, I get the impression, you know better than I do, I'm sure. I get the impression they've been on a long decline. They're not really down and out, but they're not really at the heights they used to enjoy.
They're not. No.
Is there kind of this inertia in the organization?
I think he's already touched on the delivery thing was huge for them, you know.
They really didn't want to get into it and tried to avoid it.
Yeah, but
They see themselves as a little bit better than that, as in we're a sit-down restaurant. Because when I was growing up, Pizza Hut was seen more as a sit-down restaurant than it is.
Yeah, but the market has shown them that they were wrong, and certainly there's some business people who can have a word with the CEO and say, "Look, you do this or else."
Yeah, they probably only made $1 billion last year.
Pizza Hut never saw themselves as fast food, by the way. Never.
Well, I've got some news for them.
Yeah, you start making chips.
Surprising that that Pepsi Cola are a pretty sharp outfit, and I was surprised to see them go into decline with Pepsi Cola. I don't think Pepsi own them anymore. But,
I think they offloaded. They went. They spun off to Amren, I think, M Restaurants or whatever it's called.
What's a Taco Bell?
You don't know what Taco Bell's?
I mean, I'm vaguely aware that they sell tacos.
Massive.
Is it dreadful?
So-called. Well, it is so-called Mexican food. Their tagline is "Run for the border." We call it "Run for the toilet."
They have like 6 ingredients, and they just basically recombine them every once in a while.
Super cheap fast food.
No,
also owned by Pepsi Cola, by the way.
Also, it's like KFC was, yeah. But again, with that much money behind you, and as you say, that kind of smarts, it's just confusing that Pizza Hut seems out of ideas. It's not refreshed as a brand, and they're just kind of satisfied to be that place. They have the money to be located at the mall, but and to advertise nationally, but they really don't come across as a dynamic brand that kind of dedicated to new stuff.
I'm very shocked when I go back to the UK and walk down streets where Pizza Hut had 4 outlets on one street one time, and they're all gone. Completely.
Yeah, they're all bookies. Whole British High Street seems to be bookkeeping shops these days. Same in Ireland.
Pound stores.
Oh, yeah. What is the enduring profitability of pound shops, man? People just love
Just have one more question. Your
said that
personal
already,
preferences. Well, now it's one more. What about crusts? Thin, pan, deep dish? Any preferences? Do you think that one is an abomination?
I like both, but I do prefer the thin crust because you get more of the flavour of the actual sauce and the topping.
What about the stuffed cheese crust?
I don't really like it.
Bit much, isn't it? Bit American.
Kind of gimmicky.
They keep wanting to reinvent the pizza. Just do it simply. Leave it alone. Put good quality ingredients on there.
Absolutely.
I'll make this my last question before I guess Dave will wrap it up in a second. But I just thought of something. You mentioned how delivery was a novelty back in the early days, and the boxes and whatnot. Did you guys have that little plastic table that sits in the middle of the boxes at that time to prevent the pizza from being crushed? How did that work?
It just arrived as I was calling it a day in the pizza game.
So there were crushed pizzas prior to that.
There were.
Wow.
There were.
I honestly, I have to say, I still can't visualize the pizza in a bag thing. I'm gonna have to Google the shit out of that.
It's interesting though, but it makes sense. It makes sense. But boxes are expensive, and the bags are cheap, so why not?
So anyway, Noel, I just want to thank you massively for coming onto the show, and I'd just like to give you a chance now to congratulate me on Liverpool winning the title.
Please, no.
No?
I knew this was going to happen.
Dated this
I knew this was a bad idea.
I always thought you had some class, Noel.
Dave's proud of his contribution to Liverpool's championship, well, whatever that might be.
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's fair to say everyone at the club realises without me, wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, they don't know your name, Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That's because I'm not a registered member and I spend very little money on it.
So next week, we'll talk about the best pizza in Krakow, the different kinds of pizza. As Noel mentioned earlier, we've got a great variety now. There's Neapolitan pizza. I don't even know what that is, Neapolitan pizza. There's Chicago deep dish. There's New York pizza. You know what? Maybe we should get Jonathan Ornstein from the JCC to come over here and talk about
Loves his pizza, right?
He's a pizza guy.
Tell you something, a New Yorker.
You know what? Maybe I should ask him first before I announce that he's going to be.
Yeah, maybe ask him. But I get what you're thinking with this. A New Yorker should have good cred on this subject.
Yeah.
I know food topics are close to his heart. He's very passionate about ice cream as well, from what I've seen on Facebook. So yeah, we really want to talk about our favourite places, right? And the journey that we've seen through the pizza scene in 15 years. That's what next week's pizza special is going to be about. And thanks again for coming on, Noel.
My pleasure.